hate to disrupt good fellowship, especially when I know many of you are in from out of town and catching up with people that you don't get to see as often. But that is a wonderful part of pre-convention and convention week, is the renewed relationships that you get to experience. This morning, what I want to do is kind of set the table for what it is that we've got allotted. I would love to pray for us, and then we'll jump into our subject. So this morning, I think you'll probably, if you leave here and you have a positive experience, your takeaway will be, that was useful. Maybe not, that was exciting, but like, oh, that was practical. And what we're going to be talking about is how do we care well in a crisis? Because I think I've alluded to the fact in my role at my position, I am not the 7 ways to be happy with Jesus guy. I'm not making, this is not hyperbole here. In our church, if I show up at a meeting and I am not expected, people get nervous. It means something has gone really wrong. And so, crisis is something that I do a lot. I don't think it's my fault. I think the crisis happens and then I show up. It's not that I show up and I bring the crisis with me. The crisis precedes me. That's what calls me in. I am the fireman. I don't light the fire. But that's the type of subject that we're going to be talking about. Most of us in the course of our life will go through several crises. And so even if this is not immediately beneficial for you, I hope it's the kind of thing that should a time like this come up in your life that you feel a little more equipped and the fire drills for it a bit better. But that's our topic. That's what we're going to set out to do. But let's pray, and then we'll jump in. Lord, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for the gift of another day. We thank you that you are sovereign and constant, that even the things that catch us off guard did not catch you off guard. Lord, the fact that you're not surprised does not mean that we are not surprised. And so, Lord, in those times when we are sped up and when we are disrupted and we feel disoriented, I pray that you would take what we share this morning, that it would be part of the tools that you use to help us navigate those times better. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. So, in my mind, we're going to have kind of 3 general clusters of topics around crisis. Initially, we're going to talk about triage. Now you may go, I don't use the word triage very often. That sounds like spelunking. It's not spelunking. Spelunking is something, I think you do it in a cave or on a mountain. Triage is where do you start in a really hard situation? Then we're going to talk about key traits of somebody who manages a crisis well. And then we're going to ask the question, how do we know if we've been successful in managing a crisis? So for some of you, you very much need an outline. And until you know the outline, you feel disoriented. Those are our 3 primary questions. So the first one, triage, where do we begin? Many of you may remember when you were a child, or if you had children, you go to a restaurant, and there's little placemats that they have just for the children, and they have lots of games on them. And one of those games that's always on the placemat for a child is a maze. And there's a courtesy that they give to the children that is wonderful. There's a little arrow that says, start here. And if you're going into a maze that is confusing, it is wonderful when somebody indicates to you, start here. Unfortunately, crises do not play us that courtesy. A crisis is just a blah with information coming at us in waves And we're trying to figure out, where do we start? Because most of us have not thought triage, I want to give maybe a couple of the more intuitive ways that we think about it, that I'm going to caution against this being the forefront way that we think about it. But these are things that just, if I didn't know better, this is probably what I would do. One of it is, in the midst of the crisis, as information is coming, I am just listening for what I know something about. And as I am getting information and this person is sharing what is hard, when I hear something that I know something about, I latch on to that and I go, if they stop talking, I'm pretty sure that's where the Holy Spirit told us to focus. Just because this is the subject that I know something about doesn't mean it is the most important place to start. Now, another way that we can do is we can listen for the most moral part of whatever the crisis is. And so maybe somebody's telling us about domestic violence and a child got abused and this kind of stuff, and they mention divorce, and we're like, okay, divorce, that is the most important thing in this entire conversation. And we just listen for the most moral part of the crisis. And that's what we lock onto, and we go, I know that's not supposed to happen. Let's just focus on that. What I want to do is I want to give us a more principled way that when that information is coming, and again, crises never make appointments. They just show up. Lots of information starts spilling all at once. And so we're going to think of triage and crisis in terms of two questions. Who and what? So if we're trying to figure out where to begin, one question that we could ask is who? And if I could give you a triage principle about who to start with in a crisis, start with the most vulnerable and work up. Matthew 25, Jesus is speaking in a bit of a parable, but the statement is made, whatever you did to the least of these, you did to me. And we hear that phrase, least of these, we're like, what exactly does that mean? Like, that was not an insult. That wasn't saying, Jesus said start with the minions, and whatever you do for the minions, it's as if you have done that for me, with the peasants. I think one way that we can think of what he means by least of these is those who have the least personal agency, who are least able to affect their own environment. It's not that they are the least valuable. He's not talking about rank or status. But oftentimes in his day and age, it was orphans and widows. They had the least ability to influence their own world. And so, again, if I give us the kind of situation that may come at us, let's say just out of the blue, a situation pops up and you've got a husband who starts saying, my wife is borderline and she's neglecting the kids, and he's called CPS on her because she's neglecting, and she says, my husband's a narcissist and he's abusive to the kids, and she's called CPS on them, and they're coming to you saying, hey, I need you to support me in what's going on in our marriage. If I ask you, in that little vignette that I just gave you, who is the least of these? Who is the most vulnerable? The children. Now, if we just hear like CPS, that seems like law enforcement. If we said divorce, there's lots of things that might get our attention. And if we're merely letting the shock value of that situation create our attention, we may look back on this 3 months and go, we missed what we ought to be doing. And so if we're trying, again, if I'm just role-playing this a little bit, as a church, we've got a situation like that. What I would encourage, based on what we just said, is we look at that husband and we look at the wife. We say, hey, our first priority as a church right now is your children. And what both of you are telling us is that the marriage is in jeopardy. That means the primary relationship in these kids' life is unstable. The second most stable relationship in their life may be their church. So there's two things we're going to ask of you. We're going to ask that you fully cooperate with the CPS process. Like in terms of assessing which one of you are a more fit parent. We're going to ask that you fully cooperate with that process. And we're going to ask that you keep your children actively involved in this church so that we can be a meaningful part of their life and that they have some stable voices in their life who really care about them. Now, what did we just do? We just did something that was fairly akin to what Solomon did when the two mamas were fighting over the same baby. He said, cut the child in half, give both mamas a half. And the real mama says, no. If we're in that situation and one of them is just trying to be coercive, they don't want to cooperate with that. And in terms of doing an assessment on something like borderline personality disorder and narcissism and like how stable they are and whether one of them's abusive, I think most of us would go, yeah, that's probably above my pay grade. We're going to ask that you fully cooperate and you allow us as a church to be a stable, caring relationship in the life of your children. And once we get to the back of that CPS assessment, we're going to have a much clearer picture of what's been going on in the home. That's us working from the most vulnerable up. That is triage. That's thinking, where do we start in terms of who? And so, again, if we're thinking, kind of expanding this a little bit, who are often in that least of these category? Well, children. Children can't live independently, get a job, process complex information, or secure transportation to ensure their well-being. Like there's a vulnerability there that they should be prioritized. The elderly or disabled who, due to physical or cognitive decline, may increasingly lack the same capacities that we were just describing for the child. Someone who's in a dependent status and that's being leveraged against them. Just somebody who is physically stronger and able to be dominant. How many of you ever been trained in first aid? We got any first aid trained people here? All right, so y'all can verify that I'm not making this up. Made me a little nervous when I went through first aid training as they told me this. So if I could give a parallel to what we're talking about. If you come up on the scene of an accident and you see the first person in a ditch bleeding, should you immediately start caring for that person? No. Like you're given some priorities. They usually call it the ABCs. Airway, bleeding, cardio. Did I get that right? Breathing. And those are the priorities. Because this person may be bleeding, but there may be somebody down here face down in a puddle. And if you just come to the first thing that happens and go, I want to care here, you actually didn't follow your protocol. You didn't do triage. And so you need to come, there was a car accident, let me get a sense of the terrain, what else is going on, And, this person may not be breathing, but I can simply flip them over, make sure they are breathing. Now I come to this person who is bleeding. That's the kind of mentality that we're going, okay, as we come into a crisis, how do we begin to think through who we care for? Now, so in terms of triage and who, we start with the most vulnerable. We start with the least of these. We start with those who lack the agency to be able to make the consequential choices that need to be made on their behalf. Now let's flip to our other question. Let's think triage and what? Because a crisis doesn't just have who's, doesn't just have people. It has different types of life struggles involved. And what I want to do here is I want to offer you kind of a 5-point triage on the what's of a crisis. Here's the implication kind of visually if you're kind of following on my hand here. Something that's higher on the model, it comes first. Things that are lower on the model can wait. And I want to describe the what, and I want to explain the why behind the what. Okay? So on the what, first thing, top of the scale, safety level concerns. If there is a safety level concern, that comes first. So if somebody is thinking about ending their life because they have overspent and they're about to get evicted from their apartment, this is not the time we make a budget plan. Even if we feel like we are more competent to deal with budgeting than we are with self-harm, this is a safety level concern. Again, this is about people being made in the image of God. This is about the prioritization of life. And so when you have self-harm, when you have domestic violence, when you have threats of harm, those safety level concerns, they come first. Okay? Safety, second, addiction. Now, some of us hear addiction second, and we go, is that because like addiction is a special kind of sin that God gets really bent out of shape about? It's not my rationale. Think with me for a moment. What's happening in addiction? Somebody is using a mind or mood altering substance to escape from the hardships of life. If that is their pattern, how effectively are we going to deal with anything else going on in their life if they are frequently impaired? So again, I can remember a particular counseling case. Guy came in. This is more formal settings. So we've done intake forms and that kind of stuff. I looked at his intake forms. What is it that you'd like to work on? It's like, I need to learn how to resolve counseling with my wife. Okay, well, that's a skill level problem. Like, I want to learn how to resolve conflict. So as I'm getting to know him, I kind of ask the question, what is it that you and your wife get into arguments about? He goes, that's easy. I'm drinking. Okay. Tell me a little bit about your drinking patterns. Well, it was pretty clear this guy was an alcoholic. Like he had multiple bad performance reviews for coming into work hungover. He would swing by the bar on the way home, kind of catch a buzz. When he got home, he would, by his own admission, immediately go to the man cave and start drinking, leave his wife alone with all 5 children. Let me just ask you the question. If I taught this guy great conflict resolution skills, and when he was with me, if he was attentive, if he was interested, if he said, that's good, you're right, I don't do that, I totally see I need to do that. If all I was gauging was how he was responding to me, would I be prone to go, this guy is really teachable, and he is repentant, and he seems sorrowful? I like this guy. And he can be a great counselee and still a yard bird of a husband. Yard bird, that's a Kentucky thing for like not good. And what are the odds that he's going to effectively implement anything that we talk about in my office when he's at home if that drinking pattern remains the same? It's not happening. And so I'm really glad that he wants to work on communication. From a triage perspective, in a loving way, I need to be able to convey. Like, I don't think you really stand a chance at working and implementing the things that we're talking about if you're chemically impaired when you're trying to do it. And again, this guy, for the sake of his anonymity, we'll just call him Bubba, because where I'm from, Bubba's a good name for this kind of folk. Bubba goes, that makes sense. Yeah, I went to school. I'm pretty smart. But at that point, people had just fussed at him. Told him he hadn't hit rock bottom yet. He didn't care about his family. Or, man, she's so hard on you, like she doesn't appreciate how hard you work. Nobody was doing a principle-based assessment. They were just reacting to data points. You kind of map it out and go, hey, this is what you want to work on. Do we stand a chance while this is going on in your life? Is it fair of me to ask you to do what you and I talk about when you're sober, when you're impaired? Probably not. Okay. If you really want to do this, then we got to work on that. It's a part of the process. It's a step in the journey. Okay, so we have safety level concerns. We have addiction level concerns. Again, even here, I don't just mean substance abuse. You can have somebody who is spending themselves into poverty, and I'm not going to try to say that spending is a form of behavioral addiction, but at this level, I mean, I know my choices are severely hurting me and impairing my ability to do other important things, and I do it anyway. I mean, that's kind of my shorthand definition for addiction. Do you know this is hurting you and those that you love, and you still do it anyway? If yes, it is a lifetime main pattern that needs to be dealt with first. So number 3, trauma. What do I mean by trauma? You guys have gotten to know me. I'm kind of a Kentucky folksy boy. And so I could give you technical, clinical definitions for trauma. I'm going to give you kind of a pragmatic, folksy definition that I think honors a clinical definition, but it's a little more just kind of plain spoken. Trauma is when the then and there of a past experience supercharges the here and now of my current experience to such a degree that it's hard to respond to the here and now on its own terms. Okay, so let me illustrate that. Let's say we have a friend and they were in military and they were in a combat zone. Very frequently a traumatizing experience. They come home. They are on a walk with their dog at a peaceful park. As they're walking along at this peaceful park, a nearby car is driving and it backfires. That sounds like a bomb. That sounds like a gunshot. The then and there of having been in a war zone supercharges the here and now in such a way that it's much more difficult to respond to the peaceful park on its own terms. Everything in them is responding to then more than now, is responding to there more than here. So again, if we just ask from a question of fairness and strategicness, if this is happening in somebody's life on a regular basis, how fair and reasonable is it to think you're going to deal with other concerns when you have this kind of disruption frequently happening in your life? We need to learn to process and disempower those memories a bit so that you can more consistently respond to the here and now on its own terms. Fourth, character. Character is things that are deeply rooted in my values. So if I could give an example where we go, is this, like our fifth one's going to be skill. Is this skill? Is this character? Let's assume we have somebody, it's one of the parents in a home, and they are loud, and they are demonstrative, and they are demeaning towards the other members of their family. And they're in the midst of a good old-fashioned tirade when the phone rings. And they're able to pick up the phone, and they are pleasant. Was that character or skill? It was character. Like they showed they had the ability to display self-control. But when it was just them in the privacy of their home, and there were no other eyes and no other ears to catch them doing what they were doing, they did not value the other people in that environment. What they valued was their reputation. And so if we're talking to someone and they can be pleasant with us and they are nasty in other environments, it's not that they don't know how to be pleasant and nice and self-controlled. Is that in those other environments, the people in the situation don't matter enough for them to display the skills that they have. That's a character problem. And so if we have somebody who's being unfaithful to their spouse, telling them to, like, y'all should have a date night. That is a skill level intervention for a character level problem. Like people don't cheat on their spouse because it's like, I didn't know we were supposed to have a date. Like at that point, it is a matter of character and values, not skills. And then fifth on our triage is skills. These are the people we like to work with because they tend to be very humble, self-aware, appreciative. Like, man, if you can just give me some practical stuff that would help me, and they say, thank you a lot. And there may be some aptitude things that make it hard for them to do it, but they're eager to learn. Now, here's the thing when a crisis is erupting and we're becoming aware of it. What end of the scale do you think is going to be shared with us first? Up here or down here? Down here. Like people do all they can not to share this. And if I can, in most crises, this little statement will serve you very well. Rarely is the first story the whole story. Whatever the crisis is, whether it's an addiction, an affair, abuse, that whatever that initial thing is that comes out, it's usually partial. if we're not intentional asking, of being patient, recognizing early in the crisis, we're often only doing first aid as we get to know more information. Then we start to address these things early as if they were the whole thing. And so, we have to push and ask when we're in a crisis. Like, I will tell people all the time, again, this is in a formal counseling setting, counseling is only as effective as you are honest. If you're not honest with me, I am not counseling you. I am counseling a figment of your imagination. I am counseling an avatar version of you that you put out there for me. And so when, that marriage situation comes up and it's just an emotional affair, okay, it may just be an emotional affair, but just because that's what's said first doesn't mean we operate as if that is true. Again, we lean in and we press. Say, hey, annoying thing that I say in counseling a good bit. Right now, we don't know what we know. Like, we are still getting information. This is the point in time, if I'm looking at the unfaithful spouse, this is the window when information can come to light by disclosure. If you wait and let more information come to light by discovery instead of disclosure, that is going to harm your marriage more than your infidelity. And you got to be willing to say that even if the unfaithful spouse is crying. Just because they're crying doesn't mean they're repentant. Oh, they seem so sorry. Well, they may be. But rarely is it, if we just stay in that example of infidelity, rarely is it the initial infidelity that kills the marriage. It's much more the death by 1,000 confessions. Is that everything? Yes! Then there's more. Is that everything? Yes! Then there's more. If we're going to do a good job in crisis care, it doesn't mean that we're a detective and we're able to know that, but we give them every opportunity to be forthcoming in the way that they need to, and don't blindly start reacting to what's there. And so if we're thinking triage, we have the triage of who. That is, we work the most vulnerable, we move up. Who has the least ability to impact their own life in the way that it needs to, and we move in terms of prioritization towards those who have the most ability to make influential choices in their own life. And in terms of what? Hopefully you've got a sense for the rationale behind safety, addiction, trauma, character, skill. Now, that's about the person and the situation. Now we've got to ask questions about us. Who do we need to be in order to be an effective crisis manager? Again, this is, I'm not saying this is who you have to be a good Christian. Honestly, some of us are way too sweet and sympathetic to be a great crisis manager. We're far more of a supportive friend than we are crisis manager. That's not bad. God gave different gifts to different parts of the body. And if you're a sweet person who says, I'm in the supportive role, do that. But don't get mad at and undermine the people who are in the more objective crisis manager role. Even though we're different parts of the body, we've got to be able to work together. And so I want to talk about 5 qualities that if you're going to lead in the midst of a crisis, these are qualities that you need to have. One of those is objectivity. That crises very much accentuate our biases. Big situations call for big responses. And when that situation is big, whatever in me that it strongly leans one way or another, that's going to be drawn out. And so again, let me give you an example of these are some of the challenges we face in a crisis. Just again, reflection. I'm not asking for hands or response. Do you think that mental illness is overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed? If you just looked at the culture at large and you said, hey, do we use too many psychological labels or too few? Now let's say we've got a crisis and there's a particular diagnosis involved. And in terms of culture at large, I want you to assume you are right in your assumption. Whatever you think, either way, too much, too little, I want you to assume that with culture at large, you are right. As you are getting involved in a crisis with a church member who's having thoughts of suicide and they've been diagnosed with bipolar, your opinion about whether mental health is overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed does not matter at all in whether this person is accurately diagnosed. Again, you can be right. I got opinions. The older I get, the more opinions I get, and the more I like them. But the fact that I have opinions about culture at large doesn't tell me anything about the person in front of me. They're not a cultural trend. They're a person. And if I go into that situation and go, I don't like that word bipolar, I just think it's a bunch of hooey. We just need to forget that and you trust Jesus and it's going to be okay. Or if we say bipolar, that means you don't have any control over anything in your life. We just need to take care of you and do everything for you. Whatever our opinion is on that kind of subject, if our bias begins to skew us in one way or another, we lack the objectivity to be a good crisis manager. Now, it's not just bias on subjects. One of the things that happens a lot in churches is relational bias. We tend to know the people involved in the crisis. And that means if you hear yourself saying, I just don't think they could. I know them. That bias is something you need to really be aware of. If you are such a friend to this person that your ability to be objective either default believe them or default be suspicious of them, you're not evaluating the situation. That's going to short circuit the most vulnerable up. That's going to short circuit, are we looking at the type of factors that are in play? And so think with me for a moment about James chapter 2. In James chapter 2, the context is a group of believers that they fled from Jerusalem because of persecution. They're in a context where they are having to live in a second language context. They don't have any of their social connections for getting good jobs. James says that, hey, if somebody comes to church and they're really well off, don't give them preferential treatment. Like if you take that person and they've got money and they've got power and you start to give them preferential treatment, like you're dishonoring one another. That statement about a particular type of bias. What we're saying is that we have to filter for other kinds of bias that aren't just status and financial, that may be influencing us. Second trait. So you need to be objective. You got to have courage. Crisis management is not for the timid. A crisis will always be marked by high uncertainty. Here's one of the trademark things where an absence of courage really shipwrecks us in the way that we care for crises as a church. We don't ask questions we don't want to know the answer to. We're like, ooh, if we ask that question, it could go sideways. That could be awkward. And so we avoid the important question because we don't have the courage to ask it. It may be the courage because we don't want to hear the answer. It may be the courage that just accepts, I may not know what to do with the answer. Like if I asked that question, I wouldn't know what to do if they told me one way or the other. So I'm only going to ask the questions that I'm confident I know what to do with. Well, again, that unduly truncates what we're willing to consider in the navigation of a crisis. Third, we need to have composure. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to think clearly and keep a level head when we're afraid, disappointed, betrayed, righteously angry, or otherwise disrupted. I'm not asking you to be stoic. I'm not saying like being non-emotional is the trait that we need. We do need to be steady and grounded as we experience all of the uncertainty that comes in the midst of a crisis. It means we don't become reactive. And part of what I hope this time gives us is if we don't have some structured process of going into a crisis, it makes it a whole lot harder to maintain composure. So what we just said in the previous question helps us with this one. Like if we're going into a crisis and it just looks like a blah and we're not sure what to do, we're looking for any anchor, anything we can put our foot on and seem solid. On the other hand, if we go, okay, I got two sets of triage. I got who and I got what. I got most vulnerable up. I got safety, addiction, trauma, character, skill. What kinds of things are going on? Having a bit of principled structure in how I'm approaching the situation allows me to maintain composure. Fourth, And this got kind of a fancy word in it. I try not to do too many fancy words, so we may have to take a moment here. Interdisciplinary thinking. Isn't that a good Scrabble word? Man, we're going to rock out on Scrabble after this morning. Interdisciplinary. Inter means between. I-N-T-E-R. Interdisciplinary. Different disciplines that we're going to have to work between disciplines. So again, let's just take a crisis and let's be a little playful, spoofy for a moment, okay? With as close as we can get to humor when we talk about heavy things, but just play along with me. Let's say there's a family in our church and we get to know that they are mistreating their child. Like, you don't get to do that. And we go into the home and we take the child and we say, you cannot have this child back until you learn how to behave better. What is that called? Kidnapping. You don't get to do that. Just because you're right doesn't mean you get to take their child hostage. We don't have the jurisdiction to do that. We're going to need to be able to work with another discipline. In this case, social workers. And that's when we would make a call to CPS, Child Protective Services. That if there's reasonable suspicion of the abuse or neglect of a child, then their training is to go into a home and to assess. Is this a home that is safe for the child? They don't want to take children away from families. Anybody here got a social work background? Okay. If you did, I wanted to say thank you. That social workers are some of the most overworked people on the planet. I don't know, it's like a close first and second between them and pastors in terms of how much they're asked to do. Social workers do not get over involved in a situation because they're bored. But if there is a child in danger, they have the jurisdiction to do things that for us would be kidnapping. Again, this is one where if we're involved in foster care and we're responsible in our role as a church, then it's hey, if that child needs to be out of the home for a while, we've got families in our church that would be more than willing so the child can stay in the same school, be in the same peer groups. Those things are highly valued by social workers. If you're what category does this fit in biblically? Look at Romans 13. It talks about how God set aside the civil authorities, and that when it comes to the issuing of consequences, the bearing the sword, they do that for a reason. And that they are God's God-ordained agents for justice. And so when we do that, we are cooperating with our Romans 13 partners. Again, this is one where, let's say we've got a family in the church. And part of that crisis has to do with child custody. Unfortunately common that you have divorce and battle over kids. As fellow church members, even in my role as a pastor where I'm not a licensed counselor, I've written books, I've got a lot of degrees, that kind of thing. But if somebody from the church says, hey, would you testify on my behalf in a custody hearing? All I am is a character witness. I can say, this person's a good person. I find them to be trustworthy, dependable. I find them to be stable in difficult situations. I've not seen them respond harshly. I can give testimony that is character testimony. In that kind of court setting, what is more valuable is what would be considered expert testimony. Well, as a church, we can give character testimony. It's usually a licensed counselor who can give expert testimony. There's a little more assessment involved in what they do, and there's going to be a little more robustness to how they are substantiating their claims in that setting, and their words are just going to be given more weight. Well, if we are coming alongside of a family that part of the crisis is a child custody situation, like us knowing, hey, what are our limits? Like, what standing might you need in that setting that I don't have to give you? That kind of interdisciplinary awareness, crises often call for that. This is one where, I love this statement. Actually, a friend of mine, any of you know David Platt? Does that name ring a bell? He wrote a book, Radical. I knew David when he was in college. Same dude now as he was back then. And that's one of the fun things as you get old and you get to know some people that garner a little bit of influence. You can see some of these folks, they are just really consistent in their character. But David wrote a book on missions, and he made a statement that I am all for when it comes to missions. He said, the church is God's plan A and there is no plan B. And that's true. When it comes to taking the gospel to the ends of the earth, the church is God's plan A and there is no plan B. Sometimes we'll take that and we'll apply that same statement to crises and counseling. We'll say, for crisis and counseling, the church is God's plan A and there is no plan B. And we start trying to do everything in-house, even with the best of intentions. And in the kind of situations that I'm describing, that when you talk about crises, they are not uncommon. That kind of interdisciplinary awareness becomes more important. We don't have to be embarrassed when we say, I don't do that. Can you give me expert testimony in my child custody hearing? I don't do that. That's not, I don't have the credential, the standing to do that. That's not me saying I won't or you don't matter enough. It's, hey, somebody different would have to do that. And you get into situations where part of the crisis is somebody is not paying the child custody funds that they have. And it's as a church, can you go make them do that? We don't actually, the only thing we have authority over is whether, church membership, whether you attend, whether you're a member in good standing. And we can say, if you don't do that, you are not in keeping, you're not bearing the marks of a true believer, you're not caring for your own children. But in terms of having any kind of jurisdiction, that's probably going to be an attorney or law enforcement, depending on where they are in the process. That as a church, as we care well, there's going to be the need for some interdisciplinary cooperation. Trait 5, process orientation. I think one of the things we're prone to do in church circles is we get very focused on outcomes. We know where we want it to end up. That's great. In a crisis, I lead through a lot of crises at our church. The mentality is we're going to take the next faithful step. We're going to see what happens. What happens as we take that step is going to determine what the next faithful step is. And so let's go to the situation where we said you got both parents calling the other one unfit, calling CPS on one another, and we go to them and we take that next fateful step. We work from the most vulnerable, from the least of these up. That's the children. We have a conversation with each parent. I would recommend that's done individually because they're just going to fuss at one another in front of us the way they fuss at home. Like we want them to listen to us, not fuss at one another. So it's going to be a little bit separate conversation. We're going to say, we're telling the exact same thing to both of you right now. 2 expectations we have. You fully cooperate with the CPS investigation, and that you keep your children plugged into church so they have some stable relationships in their life. Now, when we take that step, do we have any idea what's going to happen next? No. Like, that roller coaster can go anywhere. That is a roller coaster with a flux capacitor. I mean, the space continuum just gets broken in the number of options that can happen in reaction. Like the outcome that we would love is we'd love to see this family restored and unified. That's an outcome orientation. We have no idea if we're going to get to be a part of seeing that happen. That's out of our control. What we can do is take this step. And if they're like, well, why? Well, because right now, neither one of you trust one of another. And about the only good faith action that each of you can show to the other that would be meaningful is cooperation with the process. And as a church, if we're honest, we don't know which one of you to believe. You may both be right. You may both be lying. We don't know. That these are folks that are more skilled and have more experience of going into contentious homes like this. And so you can show good faith to one another and good faith with us by being cooperative with the process. And they may go, okay, I get it. I don't like it. I'll do it. Well, thank you. And if we get that, then as they go to their different court hearings and that kind of stuff, there's going to be people from church sitting next to both of them. At that point, if they are cooperating, they get the support of the church each way. And we're going to be honest, we're going to have some folks sitting with you. We're going to have some folks sitting with your spouse. This is not us taking sides. You are both cooperating. We're going to be there with both of you through the process. If one of them says, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, I'm out, deuces. Okay, if asking you to cooperate with the process and keeping your kids in church is completely unreasonable and you just want to jump ship on that, you've said far more about you than you've said about us. And at that point, it's not that we're choosing this person over that one, but as the process is unfolding, we start to see this is where we can be helpfully involved. If this person only wants us, again, one caution I would give right now, if you think this person is one gender and this person is the other gender, and you've automatically put husband and wife on one or the other, that may reveal bias. But if this person is uncooperative, we didn't choose this one over that one. This one allowed us to be involved in ways that were helpful, and this person just wanted to leverage us. And we're not going to be so beholden to an outcome that we don't have control over that we get manipulated against the more cooperative person. And so, we may get 2 or 3 steps down the road, and this person saying, why are you so supportive of them? And they start to make it this big blame thing. And we say, hey, this is the point in the process where you left us. We didn't leave you. That expectation has not changed. You cooperating with that process is what we would ask, if you will cooperate with that process, we will be by your side as much as we are by your spouse's side. And in any given situation, it's taking the next faithful step, process orientation. Like, yes, we know the ideal outcome. We know what we want. We know what we're praying for. We know this is the step we can take, and it will tell us the options that we may or may not have to get there. Again, if we say the really uncomfortable stuff, let's assume that this person, they get mad, and whichever husband or wife they are, they kind of vacate it, and this winds up in divorce. We did not give a permission slip for that, as if they needed our permission. We walked faithfully through the process, and it revealed that this is someone who would abandon their family. Our faithful actions revealed this party's heart. And that should grieve us. Like, that is genuinely sad. Should break our heart for the marriage, for the kids. Like, that's not what we wanted to happen. What we could do is faithfully take each step in the process. And then those human free agents, they make choices we cannot control. What we have authority over is whether they get to be a part of the church. If they show themselves to have traits that are unkeeping with the believer, then we would exercise church discipline. But, so that is triage. Where do we start? Who? What? These are the traits that we need if we're going to adhere to these qualities. Now we're going to fast forward to the end. We're going to say, what kind of questions would we use to know, did we do a good job? And so one thing that I can say, just as being a part of crisis management in the church, this post-op assessment is usually one of the things we omit. Because by the time we've gone through a crisis, we are behind on so much. Like, all the other things that we're responsible for did not get put on hold so that we could do that crisis thingy. And so we just jump right in to catching up on everything that we're behind on. And that can often leave us where we don't look back. And so I want to offer a few questions. Some of them should be very self-evident. A few of them may be novel. First question, did you honor your triage models? Like, we may get to the end of it and go, we didn't realize there were some questions we should have asked. Part of doing assessment is realizing you're going to learn something from every crisis you manage. So I'm using this a little different than the political way that this phrase is often used, so I don't mean this in the political sense. But we should never waste a crisis. Meaning, we should always learn from it. Like, every time we're involved in caring for a crisis, part of our post-crisis review should grow us and equip us to care for a future crisis better. And so there's times where you may recognize there was areas of vulnerability that you just wasn't on your radar to think of that in terms of most vulnerable up. And then later you saw it and you're like, we missed it. Well, what are the things that could have helped us identify that earlier? I can think of a particular book. The book I have in mind is not all that important, but it's a book on like hard cases, counseling cases in the church. And one of the cases was on addiction. in somebody who really struggled with addiction. And looking at the case study early on, at this point where I'm getting kind of older and a little more case experience, I was like, there was something just screaming on the page for me that just wasn't making it onto the radar of the person who was writing the case study. The person writing the case study is a friend of mine. I respect them. The person who would eventually come to be known as struggling with addiction also struggled with chronic pain. Well, chronic pain and addiction very frequently correlate, because so much of life with chronic pain is about escaping pain. And you use substance to do that, in that case, often legitimate medication. But per what we were talking about yesterday morning, with any substance like that we use, you build up tolerance. It takes more of the same medication to get the same degree of relief. And so that's a pattern that sets up where often you'll get, and it's like, that's the kind of thing, if we had seen that, we might have asked more questions, and we realize now that's something that we can learn. And so as you look at it, like, hey, did we honor our triage models? Are there things that we missed? Second question, did you treat each person involved with dignity and respect? Here's an uncomfortable part of church leadership. We have to make hard decisions. Sometimes those decisions are going to disappoint people. One way that shows up often in a crisis. So again, we'll get right back to this question, but I'm going to give us a couple of categories here. The difference between sheep responsibilities and flock responsibilities. As a pastor, we care for sheep, that is individuals, and we care for flock, congregation. Some pastors are very geared towards sheep focus. I had a pastor, his favorite part of ministry, he was kind of, I think most pastors don't share this in terms of his favorite part of ministry. He loved chasing ambulances. Not like a dog, but like caring for people, hospital care, that kind of thing. Like it was, like he was so good at it, and he enjoyed it. And he spent so much time on that sheep focus, they didn't have time for a sermon preparation. And then later in ministry, he got in trouble for plagiarizing sermons. And an imbalance between his sheep and flock responsibilities kind of created that dilemma for him. Some folks, we're so flock-oriented, we enjoy the public things that we neglect the individual things. This is one of the tensions that often exist between counselors and pastors. I want us to understand this so that we can mitigate the influence of it better. We're not going to eliminate it. We can mitigate it. A counselor. When a counselor is involved in a situation that has a crisis, how many people are they worried about? Their counselee. Everything the counselor says and does is centered on the best interest of that individual. When you have a shepherd does care about the individual, but the shepherd also has responsibilities for a flock. And sometimes flock and sheep responsibilities can be in tension. Again, this is where our triage model really helps us. But as we're doing interdisciplinary work and the other people who can speak into it, this is where you'll get into a situation, and I'm just kind of making one up here. Let's say part of a home dispute and that kind of thing is you have one of the spouse/parents who really struggles with addiction. And in that addiction, they get belligerent and demeaning and sometimes violent with other members of the family. And that person, who's the one who struggles with addiction and anger, they go to a counselor. And they say, hey, if you get involved in a corrective way in this person's life, that's going to create shame. And shame is a significant factor in recidivism with addiction. You shouldn't do those corrective things. And you got folks over here going like, but this person is harming, and they need to know, like the church believes that what this person was doing was wrong, and they shouldn't be okay with it. And we get some tension between sheep and flock. Now, if we go back and we think triage helps us with this, like, again, there's a sense in which, like, I'm going to disagree with this counselor over here in terms of the actions of the church. I don't disagree that shame can be a part of recidivism when it comes to addiction, relapse. Like, that's a legitimate, like, prompt for relapse, meaning legitimate, meaning frequent. But if I think most vulnerable up as a church, who is the most vulnerable? Is it the person who is making choices to live destructively in their life and others, or those who of no power of their own are having to live in that oppressive environment? These are the more vulnerable. And so we're going to weigh our choice in what we do from a shepherding perspective in the direction of the more vulnerable. But I want to treat each person with dignity. And so in conversations, like whatever form of corrective care that we need to do, we want to do that with honor. We want to speak the truth in love. That we want to be caring. We're not choosing a side. We are weighing some priorities there. And again, one of those skills of ministry is navigating those situations well. Question 3, did you involve the right people? Again, that's both in the church and outside the church. If we stick with this case study, one of the ways that we honor this guy, we say, hey, who are the men in the church? Let's assume this is a guy. Who are the men in the church that you trust, that you would want to be around you from a standpoint of encouragement and support? Like, okay, you give us some names. We talk to them. We're like, in this, there's some directives that we're not able to follow in terms of not being corrective. Like, we feel like the choices are too destructive. We want you to be encouraging. We don't want you to allow him to polarize, to triangulate, to vilify what's being done. If he's exasperated, be sympathetic. If he's accusatory, redirect him. That's what we would want for you. Because a big part of shame is isolation. Like, you know, like the strongest physical indicator of shame is the absence of eye contact. We want people in this person's life that he can look in the eye, talk about how hard life is, and have sympathetic eyes. We don't want people who are going to support and vilify, and can you believe they're trying to destroy my whole marriage? No, the church is not destroying your marriage. Your drinking and your anger is destroying your marriage. We love you. We want you to be free. We get how hard this is, and if you're tired and you're exasperated, you don't have to do any of that alone. Don't blame people the consequences of your own choices. We are going to weigh in this direction because we have flock responsibilities. That counselor is just talking to their counselee as if they are the only person in the world. As a church, we don't get to do that. We care for sheep who are a part of a flock. So, involving the right people, we want folks around him, we want folks around her, we want people who in the kid's life who are aware going on if they experience distress, and then, also the appropriate professionals we can get there. Did you communicate effectively? This is one where we're, again, it's back to sheep and flock. If you are just a counselor, for about a decade of my professional life, I was just a counselor. I cared for people and I didn't worry about communicating with anybody else. If I cared for the person in front of me, one appointment at a time, it was mission complete. As a church, sometimes caring for a sheep involves communicating with the flock. Again, that is a larger subject than can completely go through here. And so as opposed to giving sound bites, I'll leave it there. Did you identify where you needed to learn and grow? Again, don't be embarrassed. Every crisis I am a part of managing, I am learning and growing. Goes back to that idea, don't waste a crisis. Did you represent Christ well? This is not being the PR manager of the church. With each person involved, did you go out of your way to represent Christ well? Again, if I can give maybe just a different example, or within this maybe way that we wouldn't most naturally think of it, but has been really useful for me and I hope beneficial for some of the people that I've interacted with. Let's say you've got one of these situations and this person is intoxicated and unruly, law enforcement gets involved, and as a church we're kind of following up and have a conversation with the police officer, just in terms of caring, making sure that we understand custody, restraining order, that kind of thing. Because as a church, we want to make sure that we honor those things. I've been having that kind of conversation. And sometimes you're going to talk to folks who you can tell they just don't care that much about their job. They've kind of given up, they quit, they're going through the motions. And sometimes you're going to talk to people who really care about their job. And they're still working hard. When I'm on the phone with one of those people, we're nearing the end of the conversation, and I just say, hey, when you've gotten all the information that you need from me, ask the questions that you have, I would love to be able to make one statement and ask you one question, but you finish, and then if it's okay, I'd like to do that. At that point, I've made them nervous. And they go, okay, what you got? Well, what I want to say is thank you. I don't know if you're a believer or not, but as a pastor, I want you to know you are salt and light in our community. You care about your job. You're doing an excellent work at it. You're going above and beyond. I know, when you're involved, people just tend to complain and accuse, and I want to be one of those people who just stops to say thank you. That usually catches them off guard. They have no idea what to do with that because nobody talks to them that way. And then if I'm in a church leadership role and I'm doing that, I just want to say, hey, if I'm in a difficult situation that involves your jurisdiction again, is there a way that I can reach out to you at your office? I don't want to abuse that. I will honor like the community, but like you care. You went out of the way. I think you have a sense that I'm a good faith actor, and on the ministry side, I want to do things well. And that's how you begin to build a team of people. Because sometimes you're going to be like, I don't want to talk to that one ever again. And like, okay, there's folks like that in every profession. For people who had a bad experience at a church, what we ask of them is don't write off every church because you had a bad experience with that church. We want to give the same courtesy to people of other professions. Don't write off all social workers because one of them was a jerk to you. Like that's where we are. Last question. Did you give yourself permission to rest? When you get to the end of the crisis and everything is behind, and you just jump right in to catching up, that is a recipe for burnout. The degree to which when we start to burn out, because we just jump back in to catch up on the things that have to be done, that's when we start to get a little jaded, cynical. When just that disposition in us sours in such a way that for the next crises, and they will come, that we're less of that disposition that we need to be in to care well. So, what we've covered here, this is material that will be coming out in a book in May, because my addiction is writing books, and that will be coming out then. And so it will be a book around 8 case studies. So like this is some of the intro material, the conclusion material. We'll deal with case studies and use that as a way to give more practical directives. What I thought we would do now is just take some time for Q&A. So like we did before, whoever's available to be a microphone runner, if you want to start stretching and being ready to do that, then that would be good. What kind of questions do we have? And you can raise a hand, we'll get a microphone to you. I would say on like this, try to use more broad questions than going into a lot of details about a specific case. We could get awkward and we don't want to do that. But did we see a hand? Did I see a motion over here somewhere? Or are we? Go. Well, we'll need a microphone. What's up?
Who raised their, anybody raised their hand?
Where do we have a hand? Right here.
Yeah.
I will. Thanks so much. I'd like to know the name of your book so we can look for the title, or is it untitled as yet?
As of yet, it is, I am negotiating with the publisher what the title would be. I wanted Shepherding Crises. I think they wanted something more like Caring for Crises in the Church. We'll see who wins.
God will win. He'll make
Yes.
sure of it.
Yep.
He'll get the title. And your love to watch you on YouTube. Your stuff is awesomely fascinating to me, and I'm sure all of us. What's your website?
Yeah, so if you wanted resources, bradhambrick.com, just my first name and my last name. There's a variety of resources there. They're arranged topically. And so if you have found these things helpful and wanted to go from like broad subject of crises into different subjects, you can find quite a few resources there.
I'd like to know, in life and in pastoring and in counseling, what is the role and place for the caregiver to identify with the person that they're helping, to put themselves in their place.
Mhm. Yeah. And in a crisis, especially when you have a highly conflicted crisis, that's a really good question. And so we did several of these where there were crises and there were strongly conflicting narratives. It's like, ooh, they're talking about the same situations, but they wrap a very different story around what's happening. And so that aspect of empathy and how much you identify with, so we'll keep it in that area. Like, I won't make it the neat version, like a family crisis. If you have the husband, there do need to be some people around him who hear and gather and support and are encouraging. Same thing for the wife. But without completely validating and vilifying what's being said. Like I tried to give that example of if the church really cared about me, they would be doing this. And even when they're right, it's usually a very self-centered, if the whole church was about me, if I was the only sheep in the flock, this is what would be happening. And again, that group of people that are there, this is where the body has many members and we can play different roles. We just don't want to be pitted against one another. And so for us to care for you in the ways you're describing, we're going to do our best to do that. For you to say that is the only concern that should be there for the church as a large, that's too self-centered. And so let us be that response of the body to you, and let the church shepherd the flock as a whole. And again, same thing here, and so sometimes we act as if we must choose who we are empathetic toward. Well, if I can phrase that, when that choice has to be made and there is one person who doesn't get the care that they would benefit from, it's usually because they demand that be the totality of care and the center of care as a whole. And they don't allow for flock-minded care because they demand the totality of the care be just on their terms and centered on them. And if we say no thank you, that's not us rejecting them. That's us deciding we cannot center the totality of the care on your demands. Now, for the people around here, this is where some maturity is needed. Because when you get to know this person, and assuming generally the people around them, they like this person. Like, you're usually not in that kind of care team environment and you are sideways with this person. That maturity to say it is our role to do all that we can to care for this person without you becoming a source of contention when everything that you might think, man, I would love it if we could do this, doesn't always get fulfilled. And so, that is, I hope that's clear. I feel like we could get, this is the tension of these things. So I'll name this. I don't know that I can resolve it. When you talk about subjects like this, you always illustrate it with examples. The examples for a short period of time are helpful in that they make things clearer. And then the examples start to overpower what it is that you're trying to illustrate, and they become a distraction from the point. And that's where it's I'll illustrate for a while, and it's I feel like the example, I'm starting to take it too far, and I pull back. So that's what I'm doing in those moments. I hope it's helpful. Very good question. Other questions? Got one here in the back, two in the back. In the middle, not in the back.
You were saying that honesty is something that, like, if you want to help in a crisis, you want to build on that, because if that's not there, how can you help? But then I was wondering, like, how can we, like, myself, do I know really? Am I really, I don't know, we have blind spot, we have, sometimes we don't even question ourselves because we don't even go there because it's obvious for us, and we need someone to help us with that.
Yeah.
And also, like, when we counsel someone, when we help, how can I help? Like, the whole thing is mostly, how can we go there in a place we know we honest as a counselor, and how can we help someone to come in that place and feeling safe and being okay with that? I think that's my question.
Yeah. So I think I'm tracking with you. Hopefully what I say aligns with what you were asking, because I was hearing an excellent question. One is, we're never 100% sure this person's being honest with us. And if honesty is so important to get the accurate information, how do we know? Well, patience helps a lot. Patience is really hard in a crisis. Crises go fast. We get sped up out of our own compassion and just, again, there's times when we can, does this pass the sniff test? Kind of a country metaphor there. I can think of an example, again, at our church, if my title is pastor of counseling. When I make fun of my job title, they're like, what does that mean? It's like, I'm the pastor of whatever makes you uncomfortable. So one of our pastors like, this situation, it seems difficult. And he's like, I went in and like there had been something went down at the house, and the wife had called the police. And when I was sitting down with them, the husband was like, yeah, you know how they do. They always like take you in and book you and press charges and that kind of stuff. It's just what they do. And this given pastor, who shall remain nameless, I think naively believed him. It's like, that's not what you do. If they took you in and they booked and they took pictures, like, that means there was quite a bit of evidence there. And he was just, this is a very sweet pastor. Like, to believe the best, to give the benefit of the doubt, that is his instinct. And it was like, yeah, there's some things here that didn't pass the sniff test. Again, I think we, in an honoring way, so not in are you telling me not interrogation, not taking a lamp and putting on their face, but is there any important information that we've left out? Again, oftentimes when I'm coming into a crisis situation, this sounds like I'm trying to be funny. I'm not. I do try to be funny sometimes, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, I'm making a serious point. In most helping relationships, my ignorance is one of my best tools. If I am not embarrassed by my own ignorance, it's a huge asset. And so if I'm getting to know a situation and it's a crisis, and I'm like, hey, I've only been trying to catch up to where you're at for about 30 minutes now. And you've done a great job. You've given me a lot of information. But if I'm operating on a 30 minutes worth of information subset, what other important information that could shape this? And just the fact that I've been a part of it for a limited period of time kind of gives me a freedom to go, it's not that I think you're withholding. We've only had so much time. If it is a crisis for which secrecy was a significant part, things like addiction, adultery, those are things that grow in secret. Again, I think we can, in a compassionate way, just say, hey, rarely is the first story the whole story. Like, the last thing we want to do is start to build progress and have the table shake and the house of cards fall down, because that's going to be discouraging for you and everybody else. And like, I can convey my sense of, if there's more information, it needs to come out in a way that is for you. That's some of that objectivity. Like, I am compassionate, but I'm not talking as a friend. I'm talking as a person who's trying to get a lay of the situation as a whole. And so, again, some of us in here, we're going to be more of that friend role. We want to be supportive without becoming an ally that is against. We want them to know they're not alone in the midst of facing this. We also know there's more people involved. And so hopefully that gave some helpful commentary on your question. So I think we had a question back here.
Thank you. Yeah, Brad, could you talk a little bit about how you assemble a crisis team? I'm thinking of maybe like a case of a rape where you have someone who is a first responder and takes the woman to a hospital, and then you have someone who's more trauma informed, and then maybe there's someone just of a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it might be like a sequential passing on of responsibility.
So again, another good question. There's a whole host of factors there. So hear what I'm saying in a principle way, not in a prescriptive way. So guiding principles, not absolute rules. When it comes to somebody who's in a crisis, and we're going to initially talk more sympathetic crisis, because that's what you were describing, than a rebellious crisis. There's the crisis that happened to me and the crisis I created. You gave me more of a crisis that's happening to me scenario. My preference as a church leader is to work within the pre-established relationships of this person when it comes to a care team. You know, one of those questions that comes up is like, how do you know if you're a friend or if you're a counselor? Like, how do you get the difference? Here's a great litmus test for whether you are something other than a friend. The conversation starts with, my name is. If I have to introduce myself, I am something other than a friend in this situation. And so we have somebody with a very vulnerable situation like you described. If they reached out and they're like, hey, this is what happened, I'm overwhelmed. Who from our church do you know and trust and would want around you in this situation? Because from a care and support perspective, the pre-established trust of known relationships that have history, that is an immensely valuable asset. That there's lots of things we can train. We can't train history with somebody. And so that initial, like those people around in that capacity, their role is for this, I'm going to assume, young lady to know she's not alone. You don't have to face any of this by yourself. That if there's ways that we can be helpful, these are people who can help bring those concerns to us. Like it can be overwhelming to think about like, I've now got this time I've got to go down to the police precinct and they want me to go to a counselor and I've got to have a medical test and like I need somebody to watch my kids. Well, even if like those friends go, we're at work at that time, they can reach out and say, hey, like, we're involved care team for this person on Tuesday and Wednesday for a couple of important appointments. They need somebody to watch the kids. Like those are things that when you're in the throes of a crisis, just having somebody who will ask those kinds of questions is immensely beneficial. I want those people on the care team. I want them to feel fully deputized to say the phrase, I don't know. They're going to get asked a whole bunch of questions. What should I do? What happens next? What's going, like all of that where it's like this person is just verbally processing out of the midst of their own like pain and disruption. If you're on that care team, it's not your job to know everything. Like be there, pray, support. If it's like, those are good questions. Let's help you figure that out. Oftentimes as believers, our inhibition of saying the words, I don't know, get in our way as much as anything. And so, again, that's where interdisciplinary, like as soon as you brought up the subject of rape, like legal proceedings, the decision of whether or not to press charges, like those are things where sometimes it's jurisdiction. Like, is it the potential that you would want your counselor to testify on your behalf? Well, if that was the case, you would probably need a licensed counselor. Not because of their ability to be a testimony in the court of something other than a character witness. And so getting to know what it is that's going on, and then we get down in the weeds, and the example distracts from the principle. But kind of working out from who are those people that you trust most, giving them the freedom to say, I don't know. The I don't knows lead us to who else would need to be involved and what role they play. Got a question over here?
Going along with what you were saying about sheep and flock, caring for the sheep as opposed to caring for the flock, and the communication, maybe you mentioned, sometimes you have to, for the sake of the sheep, communicate with the flock, and maybe vice versa. How do you balance, obviously depending on the scenario or the situation, the privacy and care and stewardship of an individual, while also caring for the flock in the event that there's a situation that you feel like people may need to know about this, but you want to protect the person that is involved directly in the situation. And that's like just within the congregation, but then maybe also with people who are volunteering, maybe not staff members, because that can like HR level type of things, but just with volunteers and staff, how do you navigate those situations?
So again, of many, many rabbits that I could chase, I'm going to name 2 rabbits, and we're going to stick with those. Safety and no surprises. Those are kind of my 2 things. When we move beyond privacy to more open communication, the number 1 variable is safety. And so if we have a situation that we're aware of in the life of one sheep that could mean other sheep in the flock could potentially be at safety risk, we err on the side of safety. And so that, again, triage, it kind of helps us think, ooh, that usually involves the most vulnerable, that would be the case. And the guiding principle there is the prioritization of safety. I'm going to do one little illustrative thing here. I'm going to try not to chase this rabbit too far. This is where we need to understand the role that various jurisdictions play. So often when safety is involved, there may be an attorney. Oftentimes when an attorney gets in the room, everybody else stops thinking. And when an attorney says, this is the best thing for you to do, you need to know what an attorney means by best. Generally, the guiding principle is what they would call a fiduciary responsibility. Is anybody here an attorney? Okay, if so, I was going to let you kind of critique and make sure I did this right. Because I am not an attorney, nor have I played one on TV. But, they are there to evaluate risk. That risk is usually financial. When they say best, they mean safest from a financial perspective. When you hear the word safest, there's always a two-word question you got to put after it. For who? And sometimes the safest thing is not the best thing. And we don't want to be frivolous in how we arrive at that, but there are times it's like, we have a shepherding responsibility to the flock, that this is a safety concern that we need to communicate. What you need to remember is your attorney works for you. And so you can kind of shape the questions there if we needed to communicate, what is an appropriate way to communicate what we need to communicate without taking unnecessary risks to fulfill that integrity? So that's safety. We said second rabbit we were going to let go, and then these are the only two rabbits we're going to do on this one. I like rabbits, by the way. They're wonderful. They're cuddly. Is no surprises. Let's assume I have to disappoint somebody in communication about them. They should never be surprised. That if there's a statement that we need to make, and it involves information about you, you should see it and hear it before we say it. Now, if it's a matter of corrective safety thing that involves other people, you don't get to edit it. This is a courtesy, not a cooperation. Again, this goes back to, did we honor every person involved? I want to disappoint people as kindly as I can. I want to offend people as graciously as I can. I don't want people to ever be surprised by the way that we did that as a church. When I told you I am the pastor of whatever makes you uncomfortable at our church, this is the kind of situation of whatever makes you uncomfortable that I am more frequently involved in when that is needed. And so when we need to communicate flock about something that a sheep might not like, safety is it's predominantly going to be our reason, and we want to honor the principle of no surprises. So I saw another hand back here, and this may be the last one we're able to get to before we do the lunch wrap.
Just want to thank you so much. When you came last time, we were in the middle of a crisis, and you gave us two incredible gifts, vocabulary and perspective. And you modeled how to communicate compassionately. And I just want you to know that has had a rippled effect since then. So thank you so much. I also want to say, if you can't afford Pastor Hambrick's books, you can go to his blog. I've been reading your blog for years and getting so much out of it. I even have a book club around your blog. Oh. So I let people pick what they want to talk about, and we refer to you. So thank you so much. And please have fun turning your empty nest into a party nest.
We're trying to figure that out. Man, when you hit empty nest, like the fridge is empty, the pantry just looks barren, the house is quiet. When you can do anything you want, you can't figure out what it was that you wanted to do before there were all of these extracurricular activities. And so it's one of those wonderfully disorienting things. Thank you for those kind words and that encouragement. I hope that what I say is helpful. I also hope that how I say it is helpful. So I will illustrate something. I can remember I was relatively fresh out of seminary. I went up to a conference. I think this one was at Virginia Beach. It was the CCF conference. And there was a breakout session. The lady who was leading the breakout session, her name was Diane Lingberg. Any of you know Diane Lingberg? She's phenomenal. I think she is the queen godmother of abuse and trauma care. She was doing abuse and trauma care way before it was cool and trendy. She is a grandma. Her grandkids call her Tata. She is from West Virginia. She is as feisty as she can be. I've had the opportunity to get to know her as friends since then. But I sat there and I listened to her talk. And I was about 10 to 12 minutes into hearing her presentation. And I was just like, that's what abuse counseling ought to sound like. Like there was a patience and temperance to her voice. There was a strength. There was a little bit of righteous indignation on behalf of a victim, but still safe and approachable. It was tender in the way that it talked about hard things. It was clear without being overly demonstrative. And like, I learned content from her. But I was like, I want to be that kind of ambassador. I want to represent that tone in a helping conversation. And I probably should have said this on Sunday morning. I don't know how to preach. Like, they let me do that from time to time. I just talk to people. Like that is my style. It is much more conversational than it is presentation. And I hope part of the value of that is you go, I could talk to people like that. I mean, I may not be a hillbilly from Kentucky, and that part's kind of different. But like, I may not have his accent, but that sounds like the way I could talk to people. And so I hope both the content and just the conversational style and delivery is something that's helpful, not just to you, but to all of you, getting to spend the last several days. Like, there has been a warmth and an openness. They only bring me in to talk about awkward things. That's everywhere. And you guys have been steadfast and you have persevered, and the type and the quality of questions have just been, it has evidenced the quality of engagement that you've done. That means a lot. It's deeply satisfying to me. And so what I'd like to do is pray for us. Then I think any of you who want to, we can go over to the cafe. There's a little question and answer. Is that what we're doing next? All right, Jen's got the schedule. And we'll do that. And then I'll be departing back to my empty party nest later this afternoon. I'll tell my wife that's what we should call it. But if you don't mind, pray with me. Lord, we want your church to be a place of care, a refuge, a place that when we are hurting, that we can find balm for healing for our soul. When we need correction, that we can be confident that that will be spoken in truth and love with confidence and tenderness. We want to be instruments in your hand over the course of our life. Forever sharpen us and refine us. Make us more effective at representing you in each and every conversation we have the privilege of being a part of. It's in your good name we pray. Amen. Thank you.